Alright folks, welcome back to Popular Music. This week we're going to be talking about the 1970s, rock music, disco, and the popular mainstream. What does that mean? As always folks, you can find this presentation and this slide presentation on our Google Classroom if you wish to go through it at a little slower pace and at your own pace to read through each slide. Just as a reminder, I'm not going to be reading through everything on these slides, as there's a lot of information that is very helpful for you to answer the discussion questions, but I'm going to hit on the key points of the 1970s. So, the 1970s, rock music, disco, and the popular mainstream. This is what we call the me decade. It truly is all about me, okay? And this idea of the me decade came out with Tom Wolfe's label. There was this shift in values of young adults away from the communitarian, politically engaged ideals of the 1960s, this counterculture idea that we talked about last week, okay, towards this more materialistic and conservative attitude. So the pendulum is swinging from this more free, liberal idea, ways of thinking, this more free, open, we don't like the system, we want to change the system ideas of the 1960s, and the pendulum has swung over to the other side in the 1970s, where people really liked to buy things, records, players, houses, everything, and they had more conservative values. People really wanted to settle down, have families, and really go to church, to be honest with you. So the popular music market can be split into two different categories in this time period. You have the new generation of teenagers growing up in the 1970s, and adults aged from 25 to 40 who grew up in the rock and roll era of the 1960s and late 50s, who were looking for more mature material, and the music of the 1970s gave them that. There was this big reaction from the music industry, and we consider this time period of the 1970s to be a huge high road for the music industry, where music really was popular and the sale of music jumped tenfold at this time. So we got the top 40 format. If you've listened to the radio ever, you'll get there's always on Sundays or Saturdays a top 40 or top 100 hits, especially if you're using any streaming services. They have usually playlists of the top 100 hits. But in the 1970s, the top 40 hit playlist came out and dominated the radio waves. Okay, this was the primary medium for hard rock or progressive rock bands. That was in the FM format on the radios. Okay, the survey of Billboard charts of the 1970s revealed a very complex picture where traditions continued to intermingle with one another. And we get a lot of commercial mainstream at this time. Pop rock, adult contemporary, singer-songwriter songs, soft soul music, country pop music, bubblegum music, very light-hearted. Disco's music was really big in the 1970s, and this idea of the oldies radio hits. So radio companies would play the oldie music from the prior decade or even 20 years prior to the 1970s. Here are just some famous singer-songwriters of the time period of the 1970s. We've got Carole King. Her career illustrates the central prominence of singer-songwriters in this period. We've got Joni Mitchell, a very famous singer-songwriter, who began her career as a songwriter and started recording on her own in 1968. And we got James Taylor, who is perhaps the most successful long-running career of the 1970s era of singer-songwriters. So have a listen to these tunes. It's Too Late by Carole King and Tony Stern, as well as Superstition by Stevie Wonder. Okay, now Stevie Wonder is also an exceptionally successful singer and songwriter during his teenage years, especially when he was recording with Motown in the late 1960s, and he established a new benchmark of achievement for popular music in 1971 when he negotiated a new contract giving him full artistic control over all aspects of his music, which was very rare. And even to today, that you don't see that today. We also got Elton John, one of the most famous of the 1970s and even to today. Okay, he recorded the tune Crocodile Rock in 1972. And if you don't know who Elton John is, that's okay. He is an artist who illustrated the trend of long-running British occupation of the American pop charts. So as the Rolling Stones and as The Beatles kind of fell away in the 1970s. We get Elton John really coming forward and keeping this kind of British occupation of the American music scene alive. We also get Barry White, okay, very famous musician as well, okay, very multi-talented African-American singer, songwriter, arranger, conductor, and producer who achieved success as an artist in the 1970s with his Love Unlimited Orchestra. Okay, and one of his main tunes of the early 1970s is Love's Theme. So have a look on YouTube for that. As well, we get John Martin Summers, who performed with John Denver in 1975. The song "Thank God I'm a Country Boy." John Denver, okay, his style is more from that urban folk tradition with some pop elements throughout. We also get the Eagles coming out here with their main hit tune in 1976 called Hotel California. Living it up in the Hotel California, boo-doo-doo-doo, it's a lovely place, and so on. Please, if you've never heard that song before, please take a listen, YouTube it. It's actually really awesome, okay? And just so you're aware, the Eagles are an exceptionally influential band who epitomize the culture of Southern California, this very laid-back, cruising along the ocean, California vibe. Country music also became quite popular at this time period. Okay, we get artists from the country period of this time: Glenn Campbell, Charlie Rich, and, as we've mentioned, John Denver. But there was this split, this dichotomy between pop performers who capitalized, who made money on the popularity of country music, and they established country musicians who moved toward the pop mainstream. So Glenn Campbell, Charlie Rich, and John Denver are more of the traditional country musicians who took this new idea of the 1970s and reworked their sound. But then we've got people like Olivia Newton-John and Dolly Parton, who capitalized on the popularity of country music, and created songs that kind of moved them truly into that pop mainstream. And Olivia Newton-John and Dolly Parton are both very, very famous country musicians who are still making loads of money even to today. So now we're moving into a little bit more hardcore country, less traditional, okay, or more traditional, less poppy, okay, with Merle Haggard, okay, played with the Bakersfield Sound Band, even still plays today, okay, a very self-conscious attempt to return country back to the basic traditional roots of country music. That's what they really, truly wanted to do here. Which is that very straightforward, emotionally direct approach of post-war honky-tonk type sound. Okay, have a listen to Okie from Muskogee, very famous song from Merle Haggard, recorded in 1969. Your parents would know this song. Then we kind of move into the country rock scene. Okay, very important for certain bands and musicians like the Eagles. Okay, there was this shift from the single that many people heard on the radio and on jukeboxes, in the records, the LPs, to albums themselves, actual longer LPs. And there was this kind of shift from the importance of singles to the importance of the album and selling the album itself with many tunes on it. And the Eagles, as we've talked about, okay, they were a very influential band who epitomized the culture of Southern California. They started with his very laid-back, country-inspired tunes like Take It Easy, and then they released this more country rock-style music with Hotel California. Okay, and here in the 70s, mid-70s, we get the kind of the birth of modern rock. Rock really kind of comes into the forefront of the music scene in the 70s. Okay, at this time, rock is diffused into every corner of the music industry. There's pop rock, there's soft rock, there's country rock. There's rock and roll music in every genre of music at this time. African Americans were really big in playing rock music. We get Stevie Wonder especially, kind of moving into that soul rock music. Okay, and coming out of the 1960s and the early 1970s, we get no real clear successor to Jimi Hendrix, as we talked about last week. There were lots of festivals at this time period. Okay, the crowning moments of the 1960s counterculture happened in the 1970s with these huge rock festivals. Okay, they were very successful, made a lot of money, huge audiences. Okay, and they would play in these very civic centers and sports arenas across North America. In 1973, Led Zeppelin broke the world record for live concert attendance that was originally set by the Beatles. And so rock music became very, very popular, and the rock album became even more popular than the single itself, okay? Because the album could hold roughly 40 minutes of music, and that's what people wanted. They wanted to be able to play a whole album of music, a whole concert of music at their homes that would last more than, the 6 or 7 minutes that a typical single would last. Okay, technology really helped rock come of age at this time, especially in the studio. Okay, we've got an upgrade in musical instruments with the electric guitar. We also get an upgrade in the terms of studio recording equipment, with the improvement in microphone sound, with the ability to truly mix sound on these very large mixing boards. We get David Bowie, okay, one of the pioneers of this time. Okay, and his album, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Huge album in 1972. Okay, and David Bowie was considered one of those glam rock pioneers, where rock albums centered on a fictitious character whose identity, okay, is similar to that of one or the musicians in the band. There was this coherence of the album with the music itself, and concert tours were really theatrical, not simply musicians on a stage, but we get lots of things going on the stage, big puppets and huge scenes on the stage to go along with the musician and the sound that they're creating. Now, other rock albums were held together by an emotional, more philosophical or political theme, such as Canadian Joni Mitchell, okay, who really talked about the complexities of love in her music. We also get the band The Dark Side of the Moon, the album Dark Side of the Moon from Pink Floyd, okay, which was based on the theme of madness and the things that drive us to madness. And then we also get Marvin Gaye, who has the theme in his album What's Going On, which was the fuel for soul music and gospel that was influenced with political tones as well. So we get a lot of things happening. Evolution in live performance really took off here. Okay, and then here we have David Bowie on the right here. Okay, very, very glamorous. Okay, his costumes, his makeup, his hair, his stage presence, everything that was on stage was meant to evoke something. And in the 1970s, album art became really important. Okay, the LP, for example, was the container, the medium of choice for music. Okay. The dust jackets for these LPs, so where the record would go into, okay, where they would be stored in these little dust jackets, these little sleeves, okay, they featured printed versions of the lyrics on them so people could sing along. The covers of these dust jackets, or the covers of these sleeves where the albums would go in, conveyed physical appearances and rock groups' aesthetic aims. The text on the albums gave off a specific emotion, a specific feel of what the music was all about. Okay, and just a few examples of some songs to take a listen to. We've got Stairway to Heaven, performed by Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, and performed in 1971 by Led Zeppelin. Okay, we got Oye Como Va, which was created by Tito Puente and performed by Santana, who is still playing today. Santana is a Mexican-born guitarist whose rock music shows multicultural engagement, especially from Central America and Mexico, as well as the Caribbean. We also get some southern rock and jazz rock in here. Remember, rock penetrated all aspects and all genres of music in the 1970s. We've got the Allman Brothers Band. That helped. They were a group that helped to reconnect the generative power of the blues into this new rock style. We also get Southern rock, which was an established genre that paved the way for other bands such as the Marshall Tucker Band, Leonard Skinner, and the Charlie Daniels Band. We have jazz rock, where Miles Davis took this new style, especially out of avant-garde jazz music, and really put the rock backbeat into this style. A new style of jazz, such as the Chicago style, came out, and Chicago became one of the musical hubs for Southern rock and jazz rock music. And the disco era is the 1970s. Rise of disco. This idea of the night fever. From 1975 to 1980, we get disco really, truly rising. Now, at the end of the 70s, disco fell off. We're not quite sure why, but people really disliked disco in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and there was even radio companies, radio studios, who actually had evenings where they would burn disco records because disco was dead. That was the term. Disco was dead. So in this time, the mid to late 1970s, there was this rise of disco, and it became exceptionally popular alternative to rock music because it's centered on social dancing, where people could get together and dance together. And the term disco, our modern day term, our North American term, actually comes from the European term of discotheque. And if you go to Europe, you will actually see that nightclubs and clubs are called discotheques, even to this day. Here we have Donna Summers, a very famous disco singer. Now, how did disco enter the popular music scene? Well, we have novelty records in the disco style. We get the Village People, right? The YMCA coming up into this style. Okay, and responses to disco were this idea and this sense of passion, and where people were truly loyal to the music itself. Here are just some tunes to take a listen to in terms of really key disco music songs as well as artists. We get Barry White. Okay, we get Donna Summer, very, very famous. We also get a group named Chic. Okay, their tune Good Times in the late 1970s is really good. And there's similarities in these records to the beat, the steady, medium-fast tempos, the very straightforward and repetitive forms of the song. Okay, the subject matter, lots of love, lots of political type stuff, lots of laid-back, groovy styles. Okay, and lots of limited harmonic vocabulary. So there's not a lot of vocals here. There's just a lot of laid-back tunes with some vocals mixed in. But all of the music of disco share these similar characteristics. All right, here are some key terms of this period of the 1970s. Okay, disco, jazz rock, overdubbing, where you're taking different parts of different pieces of music and you're overlapping them, or different recorded parts. So you might record the vocals first and then the drums second, and then layer or overdub those sounds recordings together. Okay, and just some key people of the 1970s, people to really look at. I would highly recommend you take a look at Barry White, Carlos Santana, David Bowie, Dolly Parton, Elton John, John Denver, Joni Mitchell, especially because she is Canadian. Okay, Marvin Gaye, Miles Davis, as well as Stevie Wonder. These are all really, really important folks. They're all really important. Those are just the kind of the ones that stand out to me. All right, folks, that's everything for this week. Thank you very much for listening. As always, if you have any questions at all, please fire me an email. Don't forget, you can find these slides on our Google Classroom. As well, don't forget to answer this week's discussion question. Have a wonderful week ahead. Bye for now.